Well, hello, everybody, and we are back once again with another edition of News You Can Use. I say rebooted. I'm glad to be here, Thera Martin, with you on this edition of News You Can Use. Today on our program, we've got two wonderful guests, each with a special testimony and a special story to share. In the first segment, we're talking with Reverend Dicie Gilmore, and she's a mom, a grandmom, a community activist, and somebody who has been through it and still is reaching out to lift up other people. When we turn the page, we're going to be joined by Reverend Douglas Banks, and he's a historian, a professor, and somebody who actually has presidential blood. We'll tell you that story and more. Stay along for this edition of News You Can Use. We'll be back in just a moment. And here we go. I am so happy to be able to say hello, to introduce to some, to present to others, Reverend Dicie Gilmore. You make a difference every day. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
A lesser woman, a weaker woman of God might not have been able to persevere and do the things that you have done, but you've been strong, and I know that what's really kept you is God. It's the man above.
That's right.
But through it all, you keep pushing, you keep pushing forward, you keep staying positive and trying to look out for other people. I have a picture of your son, Nasir, and he's no longer with us.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit of his story, would you please?
It's been 19 years now, soon to be 20 years. April 25th, it'll be 20 years. Nasir is my middle child. And I told Nasir, and I had 5 kids, I told Nasir and my other son, I said, when they were little kids, I said, I promise you, if you ever put your hand on anything that don't belong to you, it'll be your mother call the cops on you. And I did just what I said. Nasir started with him, I heard a cousin of mine, they came back home, heard him talking about something they had done at the 35th district. And when I heard about it, and because I told him I promised him, I did just what and it started at the age of 9. He went around there and they broke into a car, and it was right around the corner at the 35th district. And they came back and they were talking, I overheard. And when I did, I took him, marched his little self on around to the 35th district and told them lock him up because he was the one that broke in that car.
Goodness. At 9?
At 9. And
did they lock him up at 9?
The cop took him and he went in and they took him and talked him, scared him. They didn't lock him up. But it went from breaking into a car, getting a gun, robbing people, and the whole bit. And everything that I just said to you was me as a mom who had my son arrested. The police commissioner, Sylvester Johnson, was the police commissioner at that time. And he heard my story, and when I would tell the story, and at that time, I used to be a part of Mothers in Charge. And when I would tell my story, he would listen to me. And one day he went and got my son's record when I was telling the story, and he said, you know what, y'all, she not lying. Everything he ever did, it was his mother that had him arrested. Nasir took a young man in the alleyway who lived around my way. We were having a block party one day, and his mom was, we've been getting ready for the block party, but from a distance, I seen his mother. And I thought she was coming to the block party, and she was calling my name. And I was like, oh, come on down, And when she got to me, she said, Dicie, your son took my son in the alleyway at gunpoint last night and stripped him and robbed him of everything he had. Shoes, everything. And I said to her, well, why you come tell me? And she said to me, oh, Dicie, you know how you are, like that day. And I said, no, it ain't like that. And she said that because, when I grew up down Diamond Street, down 25th Diamond Projects. We moved from there up here.
Yes.
My mom brought us up here, and when we moved on our street, we were the second black person to live on our street. And I remember when we were being up here, and because we came from down the project, I had a transistor radio, so you know how long that's been.
Yeah.
and I was listening to the transistor radio outside on the porch, and my mother said, y'all gotta get in here, y'all can't be making that noise. They weren't even that loud, but. And I was telling the young people around here, I said, at that time, I remember living around here, you could hear the crickets cricketing. And it was pretty up here. It was trees. It was beautiful up here.
Right.
But unfortunately, when we came up here, we started a gang, which was the Valley. Uptown, 24th and Burke, the Valley. We started a gang. And I used to run a gang at one time. And from doing that, you know, and my brother, I have a brother that's in prison right now who's been in there for the last 43 years. And he got life in prison. And by right, I would often say, you know, I should have been in there too because we were twins in the street. He went to Boone, I went to Carmen, you know. And like I said, when I had my kids, something clicked in and said, you can't live this life no more. Yeah. And when I did, I took and changed my lifestyle and I wound up moving away from around here and I moved to Jersey. But in the midst of, you know, doing that move and having my kids, I kept telling my kids, I promise you, and I often tell them, I said, y'all go to bag break. You know, I'm that type of mom because of what we did. You know, we in the black family, we have a taboo that, you know, we're not supposed to tell, you know. And I was like, no, I'm telling, you know. And I often say, my mother could have had, I say, 20 houses, 10 cars, trying to get my brother out of jail. And she died trying to get him out of jail. And he still ain't get out.
He's still there.
You know, so. Like I said, my kids, I wound up saying to them, because of that, I said, y'all caught a bad break because of what I seen. You know, we talk a lot of stuff, but we don't do what we say as parents. And I took and said, this curse got to break in this family because there's several people in my family who were in jail.
Yes.
And I said, oh no, this got to stop, and this gonna stop with mine. I remember the first time I called the cops on Dicie. My father was sitting outside on the porch and he was talking to somebody with his arms folded. And Dicie had did something and I called the cops on him and Dicie had come running down, Daddy, Mommy, but she gonna call the cops. He said, oh, that girl ain't gonna call no cops on nobody. He's sitting there steady talking to the people and laughing again. You know, it takes a little time for the cops to come, so when the cops came, I ran and seen him and they said, did someone? I said, yeah, I did. Lock him up.
Oh,
you know?
Boy, oh, boy.
So my father was like, this girl is really crazy.
Yeah.
She called the cops on this boy.
You were serious about trying to teach your kids the right way.
Save my sons like that, absolutely.
But so now, Nasir did get incarcerated.
Yes, he did.
He did his time. He came home. But then, I'm looking at these photographs over here. Nasir's gone.
Yes. Nasir came home, and when he came home, him and another young man that lived around here, who grew up around here. Matter of fact, when his mother passed, I was the one that helped serve food at his mom's funeral. And when him and Nasir, you know, when he came home and Nasir came, they got together, and they were selling drugs, to my understanding. And then I heard that he took Nasir a gun and wouldn't give Nasir his gun, and he wound up later on shooting Nasir. And if I had knew that Nasir had a gun, oh, matter of fact, I skipped past that. When Nasir came home from prison, he found him a girl. Went to go live with the girl, wouldn't give me his address, wouldn't give me his phone number.
He said he wasn't fooling with you.
No, because he said, no, if I do something, she's going to call the cops on me.
Right.
So what happened was, I had to know he had a gun. Yes. I would have called the cops on him again. I said, because he was a felon, and he was a felon too, you know. So unfortunately, Nasir got killed April 25th, 2004. Nasir had a son. The girl was pregnant with Nasir's son. And when Nasir's son was born, Nasir wasn't here. And the young man who killed my son, and this is him. This is Howard. I befriended that young man just like he was one of my own kids.
The young man who killed your son.
My son.
You ended up befriending him.
Just like he was one of my own children. I remember the year after Nasir got killed. We were getting ready to have a vigil, and Howie was around the corner. I went around the corner and I seen him, and I said, "Come here, I need to talk to you." And then I said to him, "Let me tell you something. I'm not dying before my time. I'm not getting no high blood pressure. That you did, that's off of me. I'm giving it back to you. You know." I said, I want you to know I forgave you for what you did. And the only reason why, like I said, I often say that I say that is because when you live that life, and I lived that life, you know, and I wound up telling, you know, people wanted to get him, came to my house, and they wanted to get him, and I was like, no, ain't nobody about him. And it wasn't because I was saved and sanctified, okay? Because my mind was saying, yeah, go ahead, when folks came, but my mouth said no. And one of the things is that when that happened, And when people wanted to get him, and I said no, you know, and like I said, it wasn't because I was saved and sanctified.
Yeah.
But what it was I know the lifestyle that I lived. And when you live that life, and I wound up telling Howard, I said, let me say something to you. Ain't nobody gonna put their hand on you. Because I know a man who sits high and who look low, who can whip you better than anybody. And I ain't gonna be praying, saying, God, get him, and all. No, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah. But one thing I know is, I know a man, and I said, my brother who's sitting in prison, he's seen it on the news. And when he seen it on the news, it never showed a body, nor did it give a name, or none of that. He wound up was sitting out and he was watching TV with the other guys and whatnot, and he said, he got up and he left and he said, that's my nephew. And they said, then how you know that? He said, I'm telling y'all, that was my nephew. And like I said, I had a lot of family members who was in jail. They called home, and when they called home, he went to his cell, and people called home, and when they called, I said, yeah, Dicie just got killed.
Our time is almost out, and I know this wasn't enough time to give the whole story and testimony, but just that you're out there, you're trying to reach out to other young people, you're trying to help people. You do free food giveaways once a month down at Kensington and
Lehigh.
Kensington and Lehigh, under the bridge. Under the bridge. Spooky over there to me. It's scary over there, but you're down there, you're purchasing the food, you're taking it home, you're cooking the food, then you're transporting it down there to make sure that some folks are not going hungry.
That's right.
Well, and you're doing it out of pocket.
That's doing it out of pocket.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
And do it once a month.
Yes.
And matter of fact, this Saturday I'll be down there at 6 o'clock. Okay. And we'll be down there feeding the people.
If people want to know, how can they reach Reverend Dicie Gilmore? They want you to come and speak and give your testimony somewhere else, encourage other people. How can they be in touch?
Well, they can call. They can call me, and I'll be more than glad to come talk to
Give
them
me the phone
and
number.
to the kids. My phone number is 267-266-9860.
Say it again.
267-266-9860. I'll be more than glad to come and to speak to anybody and see whatever I can do to help.
Thank you so much. You're such a blessing, and again, you're so strong, and you are a woman of God, and I know that. I know that, and I know that your pastor and your church family is proud of all the work that you do, and that your family is proud of you too. And we're just going to keep praying for all the young people out here, yours included, all of ours, mine too, that they'll be safe and understand that walking the straight walk is the best walk to walk.
That's right. Yeah. Amen.
All right, we got to wrap this part of our program up. We'll be back in just a moment, and Reverend Douglas Banks will join us, historian, professor, and I call him with some royalty blood, presidential blood in him. So we'll tell that story in just a moment. Stay with us. Stay there.
Our story was begun by someone else. Our story was often shaped by generations before them. Our story was forged and maybe even defined by the experiences of our childhood. But it doesn't need to be. You can be the author. Learn how at numberstory.org.
What to expect when you're expecting a teenager.
Today we're talking about how to wake up your teen, and this works literally every time.
Good kisses. Good kisses. You heard how loud
I heard. It wasn't you. Yeah. It was the...
Is that bacon?
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are back now with our second portion of our program. So glad to be with you. If you just turned your television on, you are watching News You Can Use Rebooted here at LaSalle TV 56 and at Verizon Fios Channel 36. And we're glad to be here, glad to be back. Sitting by my side right now, we have Reverend Douglas Banks, and I'm so glad to have you.
Listen, I'm honored to be here.
Yes, I got to shout out Kimberly Hinton. Kimberly Hinton, thank you so much for leading me to Reverend Banks, because we know this is going to be a story to tell and a story to share for years to come. You do come from a very special family, I would say, and just any family that can trace their roots is like amazing to me, and I'm very much into that, and I want to know more about my family roots, and I guess I need to just pay the money and go on ancestry.com and go ahead and do it. Stop talking about it. Nothing to it but to do it, right?
It's actually, exactly, you could do that, or you could do like what my mother did, which was listen to people around her who tell their stories. The only reason why I know my story is because of an oral history that had been passed down from one generation to another. That's what African people have done since they've been on the planet, but particularly when we were brought over here to be enslaved. It was important for African people and their descendants to call the name of their ancestors to the next generation. And so my mother lived in a household where her great-grandmother visited her regularly. And many people may have the pleasure of knowing a grandparent or a great-grandparent. And if your great-grandmother told you about her grandfather, would you believe that she was telling the truth about him? Absolutely.
Yes, I would.
And so my mother, her great-grandmother told her about her grandfather, who was Madison Hemings. Madison Hemings is the son of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson. Sally Hemings, the enslaved woman that had 6 children by Thomas Jefferson. 4 of them lived to adulthood, and he was one of them. And so my family heritage comes through that oral history that was passed down from one mouth to another. Over the years, it became more of a news story because they proved through the miracle of DNA that the stories that had been passed down were actually accurate. But my mother, we didn't need DNA to know that. We knew because of what had been passed down to us. And so when I tell my story, I say that I'm the 5th great-grandson of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. I must include her because so much of history has tried to exclude her, and it's important for me to include that.
Absolutely. Sally Hemings with 6 children.
She had 6 total, but 2 of them passed away in their infancy. So 4 of them lived to adulthood. She was a conflicted woman. She was brilliant. At the same time, she was very savvy about her children. She represents to me the miraculous motherhood of black women that make sure that the next generation gets more than they got in their own lives. Sally was taken over to Paris with Thomas Jefferson when she was 14 years old to serve as an envoy for one of his other children who he had through his marriage of Martha Wales, his white family. And so Sally, who was actually, it gets kind of muddy, Sally Hemings was actually the half-sister of Martha Wales, who Thomas Jefferson ended up marrying.
Part of the history that I never heard before. Because I've heard some of this history, and it's coming back to me as you're speaking with us right now, but that piece I don't recall reading or hearing anybody else talk about.
And you probably won't in history books, because when I was a child, and rightfully so, America has idolized Thomas Jefferson. I mean, he's the 3rd president of the United States, co-writer, some people say the only author of the Declaration of Independence, brilliant political mind, the architect of modern democracy, 1/4 of the Mount Rushmore. He's on the nickel and the $2 bill. You can't get around him in American history, But at the same time, when you only tell one side of a story, when you only show one side of a person, you deny their humanity.
Right.
And so he's brilliant, but I say he's brilliantly flawed. Because as many good things that he has about him, he has a whole lot of other things that were not talked about. And one of those things is the conflict that exists in him of how he could speak so well, write so well, put together what caused America to be America, but not execute it in his own life. He can say and write that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, not really concluding women, but at the same time, enslaved people. Over 600. And one of those was the half-sister of his wife, Martha Wales, who he got in a inheritance from when her father passed away. And then when Martha Wales passed away, he began sexual relations with her. She was 14 at the time. He's in his 40s. And many people look at history and try to make it a love relationship, but there's no way they could be that. She's property, she's 14, she has no choice. However, she made sure and talked to him and made him promise that her children would be free upon his death. And he did that. The Hemings family at Monticello were given some different privileges than others. There are some people who look at history and call Thomas Jefferson a good slave master. That's an oxymoron to me. You can't be both of those. I know two things can be true, but I don't think that those two can be. But Madison Hemings, my fourth great-grandfather, was the grandfather of my mother's great-grandmother, and she talked about him because she knew her grandfather.
Now, I want to know, all these years later, and history and time has passed, but the history's still there, were your family members, the white family as well as the black family, able to come together at some point and sit down and talk about the history?
It's a great question, because in 1998, like I said, it became a bigger news story because of this DNA that they were able to discover. And at that time as well, Bill Clinton was our president. And Thomas Jefferson was like his model president. And so all of the news kind of came together because Bill Clinton has his own flaws that he was dealing with in the White House. And it became on a news cycle because they had some similarities that looked like, at least on paper, in how they conducted themselves politically and personally. And so it got picked up, and we were actually invited on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1998 for the purpose of meeting our white family. Because Madison Hemings, my descendant, and his brother Eston Hemings, they were the two youngest sons. When they left Monticello, they moved to Ohio, and for a brief time they both lived there, but Eston ended up moving to Wisconsin. And because they were so fair, by that time they were 1/8 African, so they were very fair, and they could pass. And all the children except for Madison passed. Madison moved to Chillicothe, Ohio, married a black woman, and he was vocal about his father. There's actually interviews in the Ross County magazine, a newspaper that he talked about.
Well, do you do speaking engagements all the time to share this history in full to people who want to know?
Yeah, especially in the month of February.
I bet you're busy.
But it's become a passion of mine to share, because my whole message is to people that we cannot fix what we're not willing to face. And me having to face the flaws that exist in me from my family heritage, the good and the bad, and the ugly, the positive and the negative. Somehow they had to process that to include both Sally and Thomas Jefferson, and do the best I can with what I've been given.
Well, I know that you are the pastor of the Church of Transformation. It's in Germantown.
Yes, it is.
And so if people want to come and worship with you, they can do that on Sundays.
Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. We worship live and online. You can find us at wearetransforming.org. You can also find me on all social media outlets at W. Douglas Banks or wdouglasbanks.com.
And your church is located exactly the address?
It's at the historic Cliveden House, right on Germantown Avenue.
Yes,
so it's right on some historic ground, and we're there every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m.
I thank you for sharing just some of your story with us right now. We could use an hour and a half just to tell your story. Very, very special, and I thank you for stopping by. News you can use to talk to us about some history that's so very important, and we need to continue to learn our history, protect our history, and know all history, not just one kind, all of it. We need to know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Absolutely. You
and
too.
That wraps it up for this edition of News You Can Use. I want to encourage people to register to vote. If you're not registered yet, if you're age 18 or older, make for sure you register to vote. Primary election day is Tuesday, May 16th, 2023, and we need everybody to be engaged in the political process. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for checking us out.